Tod Maitland is the sound production mixer for Netflix's Tick, Tick, Boom. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. Tod, it's great to talk to you today. I wanted to start first by just talking about the volume of movie musicals that you've that you've sound mixed over the over the course of your career, including this year's West Side Story, The Producers, Annie, The Greatest Showman, so many others too. So I wanted to know, what do you find most exciting and rewarding and also challenging about working on movie musicals?
I think you actually hit the three things: exciting, rewarding, and challenging. One of the great things, because being a production mixer, you normally are just involved right when the production is about to start. But when you're doing movie musicals, you're involved about 6 weeks ahead of time. So you are infused into the community of filmmakers. And I'm also there before they do any of the vocal pre-records. So on every movie, we'll do vocal pre-records with all the actors beforehand, so that we always have that as our standard for when we're filming. Sometimes we'll film live, sometimes we'll film to playback, but I'm there in the very beginning. And one of the things that also enables me to do is to choose microphones for the actors, because every actor sounds different on different microphones. So I actually do a whole test with the actors with lavalier microphones and find the one that matches best to my boom microphone. And then that microphone matches best to the studio microphone. Because one of the things that I don't like about movie musicals is when you transition from talking to singing, it sounds like they were magically transported into a sonically perfect chamber. So the involvement of it, I really enjoy that. Plus, I get more respect. I mean, because I am a much more integral part, of the process, and I'm there to help everybody. I've done 11 movie musicals now, and really have figured out quite a few ways to, one, make them easier, but two, make them more real, make them as real as they can possibly be. For instance, one of the things that I'll do is, like if you're doing a big dance number and it's all going to be lip sync, then you're playing speakers on the set and the actors are lip syncing to it. But by playing speakers on the set, you now don't have the opportunity to record any sound effects. So now it's a blank void. So now you're really just dealing with the studio recording. So after we're done doing the scene, I'll give everybody earpieces and I'll have them go through the exact same scene, but without vocalizing anything. And I'll have 3 boom microphones following them around. And then this way, now you have a built-in Foley track that, captures the exact effects, whatever it is. If it's tap dancing, if it's like in Greatest Showman, it was all the stuff with the shot glasses on the bar. So anyway, so a lot of tricks that I've learned along the way. And plus, I just love movie musicals. I think that, it's a great energy on the set. Film sets, every film musical set that I've been on has a different, higher energy. It just is natural with the music, and then the music gets, stuck in your head forever.
I have to imagine, even amongst those 11 that you've done, Tick, Tick, Boom must feel pretty unique in the sense that it is about staging and writing a musical. For the stage, Jonathan Larson was obviously a composer, most famously known for Rent. And what's so great about the film is it does kind of give us both performance pieces that are from the musical that he's writing, but also, character and plot songs. So how do you approach those two different types of songs differently and kind of make them cohesive in one singular musical?
One thing I always try to do is try to make everything sound real. And part of the things that I just mentioned earlier are parts of that. So in this, there were fantastical scenes that, we knew we would never be trying to do anything live with. But otherwise, we pretty much try to capture as much live as possible. And by doing that, it just kind of really helps create that real feeling. So as Jonathan is writing his pieces, and his Bohemian song and all of that, things that happen kind of spontaneously, you really want them to feel like they're spontaneous. You don't want them to feel like they are, staged in any way, shape, or form, really. So I think for Tick Tick Boom, that was one of the first things when I met with Lin, is that he really wanted to try to, make this thing sound, as natural as possible. And Jonathan himself was really kind of just a wild, off the cuff kind of guy. I think Andrew captured him amazingly. So there's just always something to capture with him, and there's always sound going on, on those sets. So.
Yeah, you mentioned one sequence that I wanted to ask you about, which is Boho Days, an early kind of highlight of the film. And as you're saying, there is a lot of spontaneity to it, and it's also sung a cappella, and the accompaniment in the scene is really just hand claps and the clinking of glasses and other kind of apartment sounds. So I have to imagine, or maybe not, that it was challenging to capture that, not only because it seems like it was done live, but also because the sound is very restrained, right? There's not a lot to capture. So can you just talk us through, working on that particular sequence?
Sure. There actually was a lot to capture because everything was live. So we had I wired everybody. Nowadays, we basically put a lavalier wireless on everybody. And then I had 3 booms following around, one staying with Andrew as much as possible, and then one going over to Michael, and then just trying to, because I love the sound of a boom the best of all. A boom microphone just captures the element of sound better than a wireless microphone. Wireless mics are great and we use them all the time, but a boom microphone has a bigger diaphragm. It captures a little more of the ambience of the room. So again, it helps create, more of that naturalistic sound. So in Bohemian Days, it's really, it is all happening. We just let it go. I mean, once it started, we pretty much let it go, and camera just kind of flies around with them. And my boom men are in there going around. The crazy thing about that is that we had to film that during COVID. So we started the movie in March and then shut down after 9 days and then came back under the strictest protocols ever. And when you're doing live singing, when you sing, spittle comes out and bad COVID things, come out of your mouth. So every crew member that was in there, first of all, we had a quarantine to do that scene. And then every crew member had to wear a face shield, glasses, a medical smock. It looked like doctors making movies. I mean, it was really just, that kind of bizarre scenario. But anyway, I mean, we just let it go, and when you do that, you just really capture everything you possibly can. You try to put them as many things as you can on separate channels so that in post, they can pull up the volume of this a little bit, pull down the volume of that a little bit, and really kind of smooth everything out as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the COVID protocols, because I was wondering, did you do all of the pre-record prior to shutdown and then come back? Is that how the process worked?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Thank God.
Yeah. So another thing I wanted to mention, and this kind of ties into that question, is one of the things I really love about Tick Tick Boom in particular is the musical sequences are so dynamic. The opening number, for instance, kind of plays out across a variety of locations, from the New York Theater Workshop where Jonathan Larson is performing the song, but also kind of shots of his as it plays out across his life. So how do you kind of make those kind of really dynamic and varied sequences feel really cohesive and seamless in the sound production?
No, it's a good question. So it does start off with him in the theater. So everything that's in the theater is live, because we have obviously the advantage of having microphones right there, which makes life a whole lot easier. So you use that as your bass track, and then you pretty much go off of everything from there. So again, you shoot a movie over months and months of time, but you see it in 2 hours. So the sound really needs to say the same, whether you're shooting in a bathroom, in a car, outside on the streets, you have to get the actors' voices in your head and then always try to match them to the environment. So that's one of the things that I always do, is that once I got Andrew's voice in my head, then I knew I could either use a lavalier on him, or I could use a boom mic, or I could use a studio mic, and I could equalize it and place the microphone in a way so that it would match, from scene to scene to scene. And it's one of the important things about being able to mix, because microphone placement really is so much of what we do. If you get a lavalier in a great place, it's going to sound fine. But if it's under a sweatshirt like this, you're going to muffle it. It's going to be muffled. So now you have to try to, equalize that to match it if you can. So.
Right. That makes sense. Another sequence I want to ask you about, which is one of my personal favorites in the entire film, is Sunday. And I have a few questions on Sunday. So to start, Sunday, for those who maybe aren't aware, is a tribute to Stephen Sondheim's musical Sunday in the Park with George, and one of the numbers from that. So I was just wondering, what kind of conversations did you have with director Lin-Manuel Miranda about either kind of replicating or paying homage to the sound of the original, or just, what were the conversations like about capturing this pivotal moment?
Well, Sunday was one that we knew we were going to do a lot of playback. So the lead up to it all is live, and then it goes into this fantastical part. And again, we filmed that during COVID. So now you have all of these Broadway legends that are in their 80s, and nobody wants to kill them. So we ended up, the entire crew had to quarantine for 2 weeks while we were filming that scene. And even during that filming that scene, we would have to tile in the actors. Tiling means like with computer graphics. So we would lock the camera off, and have Bernadette Peters over here, and then Bernadette would be out of there, and we'd have somebody else next to her. And then all of that has to be composited back together later. And then we had to go back in and actually do some of their vocal pieces, because some of it we weren't able to capture, during the whole COVID time. So some of it we actually had to go back and do it later on in post. So it was always going to be a very big production number, and not so much of a live number, and just trying to capture some of the sound effects inside the diner, and that would help, kind of keep it, keep it as real as possible. But it was never meant to be a very real scene.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. And you just raised another question I wanted to ask about it, which is capturing and trying to, make sure you honor all of these distinctive voices. I mean, as you said, you have Bernadette Peters, Bebe Neuwirth, Cheetah Rivera, Brian Stokes Mitchell, who have such distinctive voices. So how do you kind of make sure, either in the mix or as you're capturing them, that it comes together and you can really kind of hear all of their voices?
Well, just naturally you can tell who they are just by the nature of who they are. And since they're small little pieces, that was really one of the less difficult parts of it, just capturing those moments, just making sure they're in sync and making sure that they all work. We didn't do any of that live, again, because COVID was just very restricted at that point. Once COVID started, they only let us do 2 songs live. And when we did them, we had to go through, again, all these restrictions, to do it. So I was happy that we did, like, for instance, the scene that we do in the Belvedere Castle out in the rain, and when he's playing piano. That was a really good example of how pre-record works against live. So we had pre-recorded the scene where he's singing about Michael, and the emotion that Andrew had on the day when we were doing it, he was so much further along emotionally than he was when he did the vocal pre-records 2 months earlier. So we ended up doing the entire scene live, just because the vocals didn't match at all what he was performing, on that day. So we switched everything to live. and it turned out amazing, because you really capture that full emotion, and which always makes me happy, because I'm always trying to capture things live. I'll do things like even just capture the first line of a song live, even if I know we're going to do it on playback. If it's a big dance number, you're going to go playback. But even those dance numbers, I'll try to capture the first line live. So it gives the audience that transition from speaking to singing, and it sounds very similar. And then within that first line, you can then transition to the big fat studio microphone, and it's not that abrupt change. So it tricks your mind into thinking that it is live.
Yeah, and speaking of the Delacorte Theater where you filmed that sequence, that song "Why," there's so many unique locations in the film, from the pool for the swimming sequence to Times Square, and it looks like Schubert Alley at one point. So how did you kind of work across all these different locations? What are the challenges of recording in, let's say, a swimming pool? What were some of the challenges, or what was the most, I guess, unique challenge of working on, or location of working on the film?
That's one of the things that I like most, is that every day is different, and every environment is different. I mean, I've lived in New York City my whole life, so I know how to deal with New York City sounds, and it's always a challenge, and it's very difficult for other people that come here to film, that haven't had to deal with, particularly the level of noise, that's here, which is just too much as it is. But for the pool, for instance, we put underwater speakers in the pool so that Andrew could stay in sync with the music. I even had an underwater microphone in there. We use maybe a little bit of it and just dabbling with it a little bit. But again, it's just really kind of, picking and choosing the microphones that'll best suit the environment, as much as possible.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I'm so glad you mentioned the kind of underwater work for swimming, because again, it's one of the really emotional highlights of the film. Finally, since Gold Derby is an awards website, I wanted to ask you about your 4 Oscar nominations. Can you just take us back to going to one of those ceremonies, either the very first one you went to, or even the most recent, which was in 2020 for Joker? What is it like being there, and what does the recognition mean to you?
The first one that I went to was for Born on the 4th of July, and I had no idea what to expect. And to me, it felt very much like a giant television show. And it kind of was. Back then, they actually even had an applause sign up at that time.
Wow.
They quickly got rid of that. But then you realize, here you are with all of these amazing people, and they do a lunch. So they do a nominees lunch, which is actually a really nice event, because it's really just the nominees and a guest. And so there's maybe 200 people in a room. So you actually have the opportunity to walk around and talk to people, who I've done 110 movies. So there's a lot of people, that I've come across. So it's really nice to get that moment to kind of recapture. And then last year, going to the BAFTAs was actually really wonderful, because it's really a 3-day event, and they go all out. You're doing all these events, with Prince William and the family, and besides just the BAFTAs, there are all these other events that are going on. So you can really see, like, this is where Hollywood spends the money. It's like, is to get these moments up. But it's a wonderful thing. I mean, what else can you say? It's a great thing to be nominated, and I'm really loving where I am now with doing musicals, because I feel that musicals are incredibly complicated. And I mean, I did West Side Story also, which is even, is like Tick Tick Boom on steroids. You have 22 people that are just constantly talking, singing, fighting, dancing, and so much environmental sound, because it's a period piece. So there's so much to capture. I'm running like 30 tracks, on the streets of New York, kind of like doing a Broadway show on the road. So to me, it's great. I love the energy of it. I really like where it brings me. The first thing I ever did was The Doors, and that was learning by fire, and really learning that there was no real roadmap, how to do a musical. So that was my first one, and it helped me kind of really start to build a roadmap. So now I have like 10 elements that I bring to musicals to make them better.
Tod Maitland, congratulations on Tick Tick Boom and also on West Side Story, which is opening this weekend as we're talking. So congratulations on both films, and thanks for talking to Gold Derby today.
Thank you so much. Good to talk to you.